it's brilliant in a way. I mean, when you actually follow all the money trail of all this stuff, it's really kind of hard not to admire the ingenuity of these guys.
Yes, it's too bad they're raping the shit out of us.
Exactly.
Now, the third bubble was the gas commodities bubble.
Right.
You know, we were told that the reason why gas prices went up to $4 was, of course, because demand had increased so much.
Right.
Amazing that it had increased twofold in just a short period of months.
Right.
And now it sort of went back down to demand must have decreased twofold, but that's not really what happened.
No, and what's really funny is if you look back at last summer and you listen to what was going on in the news while gas prices were soaring, you had, John McCain obviously made a huge issue out of the fact that we had to immediately start drilling offshore,
right.
And Barack Obama was saying that we had to start all driving hybrid cars. The reality was that that supply had gone up significantly during that period, and the pace of demand had risen much more slowly than supply. So actually, prices should have been going down during that period, not going up. It had absolutely nothing to do with supply and demand all last summer.
And strangely enough, Goldman Sachs is in the middle of that as well.
Of course, yeah. Really, the reason that the prices went up is because speculative demand went up for these commodities. By the middle of last summer, a barrel of oil was traded 27 times before it was actually consumed. So what this meant is that banks like Goldman Sachs were taking investors, particularly people who had lost a lot of money in the housing market, and convincing them to invest in oil futures, which they said were going to be secure and profitable. And as a result, all this speculative money dumped into oil futures, and the current price of oil is based upon the price of the future commodity. And so when people started buying these futures en masse, and these were all speculative investors, the price of oil started to rise. The real price of oil started to rise.
Because the price of futures started to rise.
Right, exactly. Now, this never should have happened because there are safeguards that had been in place since the 30s to prevent the amount of speculative money in the market from overwhelming the real supply and demand. There was a law that was passed in 1936 called the Commodity Future Exchange Act, and this regulated the amount of speculation on the market. It said there could only be a certain number of speculators in the market. But Goldman Sachs, back in 1991, through its subsidiary called J. Aron, applied to the government and asked for an exception to this rule. And
because
it's very, very complicated. They said that they had a real need to hedge their risk as well. And they again, this is all complicated, right. But there wasn't any
long and short. It was because they were special.
They were special, exactly. And they got the exemption, and after that, quietly, the government issued 14 or 15 more exemptions just like that to other companies. And as a result, last year or the year before, the number of speculators finally started to overwhelm the real players in the market, and speculative demand just started to dominate the market.
Place Obama in the context of this. I mean, one of the biggest disappointments for me with Obama was he brought in the same sort of Clintonite type of economic people that I specifically didn't want to see.
Right. Well, I mean, the worst is that Bob Rubin was involved. Bob Rubin was in charge of Obama's economic transition team, and a lot of this stuff can be traced directly back to Bob Rubin. I mean, the two major deregulatory moves that play an important part in all of this were the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act in 1998, which, like you said, that law prevented commercial banks, investment banks, and insurance companies from merging.
It created basically Citigroup,
which Rubin
it was Citibank, and now it's Citigroup, and then he got paid an enormous amount of money to sit in a corner office, and who knows what he was doing.
$140 million is, I guess, what he made. Then there was the law that deregulated derivatives, the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which was passed like the day before Christmas, and after George W. Bush had been elected and Clinton was in his sort of lame duck presidency then. Those two laws were substantially pushed by Bob Rubin, and they were, without those laws, the financial crisis does not happen. And yet, Bob Rubin was in charge of Obama's economic transition. So
Rubin is not part of the team now officially, anyways, but a lot of his acolytes are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, are we? Is this isn't ending anytime soon?
No. I mean, again, you have to remember that the unspoken factor in all of this is that Goldman Sachs and banks like it are the dominant campaign contributors. They were the dominant players in the entire sort of market of campaign contributions. They were the #1 private contributor to Barack Obama. They donated something like $4.5 million to Democratic congressional candidates last year. You're not going to see meaningful reform of Wall Street that is going to hit directly at these contributors. It's just not going to happen.
So where are we now? I mean, basically, we're in the exact same place as this. It's just a question of what's going to be the next way that we get screwed. Right,
exactly. There haven't really been any new safeguards that have been put into place for any of this stuff. They did phase out the exemptions that on the commodities market, but that hasn't really resulted in any new change. In fact, the price of oil has doubled this year. It went from $30 to $76 a barrel. And this is despite the fact that supply is at its highest level in 20 years and demand is at its lowest level in 10 years. So prices should be plummeting right now, but they're actually going up. And the same dynamics are basically at work.
Goldman responded-ish to what you're saying, basically by calling you an idiot. In a sort of sniffing at your stuff and basically saying you're a conspiracy theorist.
I obviously approached them when I was writing the story, and I said, hey, I have a list of questions for you if you have any issues with any of this. I mean, I certainly was planning to wail on them anyway, but they declined to address anything specifically and just said that the tone of my question suggested that I didn't know what I was talking about, and they've since called me hysterical and a conspiracy theorist, but they haven't yet taken specific factual issue with anything in the article, which to me was a big sigh of relief, because I was actually worried that I'd gotten something wrong. I don't have a background in any of this stuff, but it turns out that they don't have a quarrel with anything factually in the piece. So I think that was important.
All right, folks. Matt Taibbi, Rolling Stone magazine. Pick up this article. It's a great read. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.